Thank you for joining us on our very own East Central special for the year. Now, I'm going to introduce my very first guest. She's someone that I definitely admire. I watched her speak at a conference. Sometimes I was like, no, we definitely have to get her in this room. Because, ladies and gentlemen, my guest for today is no other person but Isioma Idigbe, partner at Punuka Attorneys and Solicitors. Hi, Isioma.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
That day I watched you speak at the SASEM conference, MB and SASEM conference. I was like, wow, she has a lot to say. I definitely need to get you on this program.
Thank you. I didn't even know that was where this was coming from.
That was definitely, that's where, now you know.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I mean, what we're discussing Afrobeats, what the year has been like so far. For you, how would you describe the year 2024 musically?
I think the year 2024 is maybe what we can say the year that Afrobeats truly became international.
Okay.
To the extent that you had our biggest performers selling out huge stadia, not in the typical countries like US, UK, but in countries like India and Singapore. You had big transactions like Universal Music acquiring Maven, which is major. So I think this was the year where, we really now sort of went into the international business ecosystem of music. And if we play our cards right, it should get better from here. I think we also had big wins locally in terms of the establishment of a special ministry for creative economy. And also things like the Record Labels Association sort of being formally introduced into the market. And I don't know if you've been following, but really like positioning in terms of engaging with users, engaging with the government, and things like that to really get the domestic ecosystem to start to generate revenue for those in the music business ecosystem.
I mean, that's a lot of things that happened this year. For you, again, on the music side, which artist did it for you?
Oh. I mean, I would say Ashake surprised me because I at some point I thought he was a one-hit wonder. And with the last EP, I think album, yeah, that was really great. Aresta as well had a strong album for me. But actually, a genre of music that we don't talk about a lot is the gospel music genre as well.
Fact.
Actually, I think I had a chance to speak at a gospel music conference this year, and I think it's put together by Pastor Nathaniel. And, gospel music in Nigeria is also very international, but I think people sort of downplay how big Nigerian gospel music is.
I mean, Sony signed their first gospel, Sony Music Publishing Sony Music West Africa, Publishing West Africa, they signed their first gospel artist.
So I think the gospel music space really sort of matured, and they're having serious conversations about really functioning as an industry and not just, an extension of the church choir, right? But I think Ashake, Aresta, Thames, how can we not talk about Thames?
I know, Born in the Wild.
And you know what's so funny about Thames? So when they had the issue in Uganda, it was actually Punuka that worked to get them her Omale and her manager Donna One released.
Yeah.
And I've never met her. And right after that, she blew up. So I just find it so fascinating all the time when I see Thames'
the stories that we don't hear.
Exactly. So Thames, if you're out there, this is the lady that got you out of jail in Uganda. So, hit me up. But Thames, I mean, has been really great as well. So I think for me, those are my three big... Rema. How can I not talk about Rema?
Rema as well.
I remember going to Singapore. This was last year, and every taxi in the car was playing Calm Down.
Calm Down.
So, I mean, let's talk about Ozeba and the experimental EP he brought out, bringing in some rock music and stuff with Afrobeats. But yet still, in all of that, there are still markets we haven't explored, like Brazil. I'm always shocked how our music is not as popular as it should be in a country like Brazil.
Especially because there's a thriving Yoruba community there, for one.
Exactly. They identify as Nigerians, as Yoruba people. They are at least 60% black. So there needs to be a lot of work around getting our music into Brazil, because Brazil is one of the biggest economies in the world. they have huge disposable income and, stadia and the rest.
So, I mean, this year, a lot of things has happened this year, and truly, I have been personally impressed, right? But how would you say the streaming platforms, platforms like the streaming platforms, for example, Spotify, and, say Billboard, has contributed to the growth of, African music or Afrobeats this year?
I think Spotify being in market and trying to find its feet in this market and just being present, I think is great. Obviously, I don't know if they're releasing their data around how many subscribers do they have or what's their growth like, but they're still here. I think this will be their second year, so I guess it's doing well and it's major. But they need certain enabling environment domestically for them to grow more, such as more internet penetration, better data bundling. So, because of course, when you stream music data, and we need to making sure it's affordable, it's accessible. We need to resolve those things. Payment, I think payments is not really more of our problem now. It's more about even people getting that internet and that data to be able to use these things. And this is where things like RELP, which is the Record Label Associations, are key, because they are the ones that are having these conversations with government to say this is the enabling environment that we need for all these businesses, Spotify being included. And I think for Billboard, it's great that they're recognizing professionals within the space. So recognizing music executives in Nigeria, or not generally Nigeria, but that are working within the Afrobeats genre. And so that gives more exposure to the space and what's sort of going on here. So I think that has also brought a level of professionalism that has been growing steadily over the last few years, but Afrobeats music executives are now music executives on par with other music executives everywhere in the world. So we've really plugged into that's what I was saying earlier, that we've really, I feel, consolidated to an extent, and there's still some more consolidation to do, but we've really consolidated quite significantly our position as a key market within the wider global music ecosystem.
Okay, guys, we're still expecting a few more guests to join us on the show, so keep it locked down. This is going to be an entirely robust conversation. So I want to talk about the sound, right? Earlier this year when Rema put out his, at the listening party at the club that night, he said something, and I think he also reiterated this on the Breakfast Club when he went on an interview with Charlamagne the God, and he said that, people that he decided to make He Is the way he made He Is because he feels like, Afrobeats, people are replicating our sounds outside there. He needs to do something that is authentically ours, that nobody else can. Nobody else can wake up and do an Ozeba, right? So what do you think about the conversation about, the gentrification of Afrobeats? People are saying that our music is being adulterated in some form, that we're watering down our music to appeal to the global sounds. What are your thoughts, or what's your position on this conversation?
I have a lot of thoughts about this, actually, and my thoughts are multi-layered on this issue. I think it was inevitable, and we see it happening. Chris Brown is pretty much an Afrobeat artist at this point. Right? So, once our music went out there, you look at someone like Tyler, for example, saying she's not an Afrobeat artist. That's actually another artist I should have mentioned, but she's not Nigerian, and I was focusing on Nigerian artists. But, I mean, she sort of broke out riding on the wave of Afrobeats, right? So once your sound goes out, and remember that it's not just the artists, there are all these producers as well that are coming out of the Afrobeats genre that end up sort of producing for not just Nigerian artists, but also other artists and songwriters as well, which is, I feel like songwriters in our music ecosystem, apart from Peruzzi's, like, they're really underdogs, right? And so they're going into writing camps with all kinds of people. And so, of course, our sound would go beyond our borders. It didn't happen to us alone. If you look at dancehall, for example, it's the same thing. But I think where we need to be concerned about it is if the acknowledgement from where it originates from does not come. And one of the ways to do that is to make sure that we're protecting certain things that are peculiar IPs to us. That's on one side. And then the second and more critical issue for me is if a situation, which it can happen, arises where someone far away can essentially manufacture an Afrobeats artist. And, you know, we are facing that risk to the extent that we're not able to monetize domestically. So, which is why it's so important to monetize domestically. Because right now, Afrobeat is hot all over the world. It could be a phase, it could be permanent. We don't know. And so the only thing that we're certain of is Nigeria and the extension of Africa will always like Afrobeats. It's our sound, it's our music. We need to be able to domestically monetize within Nigeria and Africa. So that regardless of whatever happens, yeah, it doesn't matter to us because we're still going to keep making music and we're still going to generate revenue. And a good way to, example of that is, you know, when you do burials and weddings and you have to go to the village, hardly ever are you bringing in one of these modern acts to come to your village for a burial. You bring those local high life or whatever kind of sound they have, or Fuji. And so it shows you that those people, regardless of the fact that people, you know, Wizkid or Davido or whatever have taken some of those sounds and modernized it and globalized it, people still want those sounds just the way they are. And, you know, those people could fully be touring this country if we had better stadium to accommodate them. So that's what I think we should be focusing on, local and African monetization versus being scared that other people are taking our sound, and also protecting our indigenous IP. So some of these sounds are cultural intellectual properties that can be protected as, for example, intangible heritage assets, like you've seen recently with the Kente cloth that they've done in Ghana, or with the, I think, the Damba festival in the northern part of the country. So we also need to be able to identify these things.
And I also recently found out that pandas are also like national heritage stuff to China. So like they don't go out, they know that it's there.
Exactly. So hell, you can go to a zoo in New York and still see a panda. But best believe that they've gotten the necessary permissions from the Chinese government to have that there. So that's exactly what I'm talking about. Protect what you need to protect, but be focused more on being able to domestically monetize, so you are not scared of, because what you're scared of is being replaced. You cannot be replaced in your own land.
You know, I have a theory about, you know, this entire replacement of Afrobeats or sound dying eventually. But I mean, you've also mentioned a few key things that I believe are part of the conversations we're going to have later on the show, which really centers around structure and the things that, you know, people say Afrobeats, we need to build structure, we need to build structure. So some of the things you've mentioned, I kind of identify those things as part of the structures that we need to build. We're going to talk about that later. But my thoughts on, you know, the entire Afrobeat wave going, I think that because of Africans, I think that poverty has turned Nigerians into the Israelites. So like we're everywhere in the world. And I think that also contributed to our sound going global first, because like anywhere in Nigeria, a Nigerian, you know, we automatically become like micro-influencers because we're happy about our music. Next person's like, oh, what are you happy about this music? Oh, he's coming to London next week. Let's go and watch his show. And you go and you're wild. So I think that because Nigerians are everywhere outside the world, I have a theory that we're not going to experience the death of Afrobeats as soon as possible. Nevertheless, we don't know what the future holds. But I mean, that's just my theory. But I mean, even away from this, you know, some of the things that people had spoken about, especially on social media, or, you know, you mentioned Tyler earlier, was when Tyler was, you know, she bagged a lot of nominations this year under the Afrobeats umbrella. And yes, you know, conversations were made about, okay, you know, Tyler is not Afrobeat, she's Amapiano. But I don't think that, with the Billboard Music Awards nomination, Tyler wasn't the problem. But there was this guy called Adam Port.
Yeah.
He was also, and his music is basically electric music. Like he's not a Afrobeats guy, but he was also nominated under the Best Afrobeat Song category. So I think that is now raising the question. You know, it's doubling down on the conversation of, you know, are we losing this thing right before our eyes? Because why are they nominating somebody else? So I mean, what are your thoughts about, you know, these international and global awards being used as a metrics for success, determining success for our music?
I think what you see with these goofs at the awards is an attempt to box an African musician into to box them into a certain box. Yeah. I listened to Thames' album Born in the Wild, and frankly, there's some Afrobeats and there's a whole lot of R&B
in it, yeah.
Right? So I think there's this constant attempt to say, once I'm an artist from Africa, I must be an Afrobeats artist. And there isn't an honest understanding of the origins of Afrobeats, which sort of come from Nigeria and to an extent Ghana, right? And so even when we have this conversation about, well, Tyler is Amapiano, I also think we need to be careful. We do so much divisiveness within the continent that is not progressive for us. We're stronger together. 1 billion people, we're stronger together. And Nigerian artists have also lifted a lot of Amapiano sounds as well.
Yeah. I mean, we started the wave. We started, we steal everything.
You know, I won't say we stole, we collaborated, because that's what creatives do. Creatives are supposed to be above the fray of the political or social conflicts and just make beautiful art. So even this whole Amapiano or whatever, some of the biggest songs, for example, Jerusalema with Burna Boy, is an Amapiano song, right? So I think it's more about trying to force African artists into categories. And I think that there's a problem with that, because an African artist, as far as I'm concerned, could be a rock star, could be a gospel singer, could be a pop singer. Tyler is a pop artist, if you ask me. You understand what I mean? Sorry, I think the issue is they're trying to box them in. And you know, when Wizkid has had his whole internet tirade, I mean, there could have been a better way to express that, but I understood what he was trying to say by saying, because once you put me in the box of Afrobeat, what does that therefore mean for me as an artist? Does that limit my growth or what you think I'm capable of? So I think Afrobeat should be Afrobeat as a genre and be respected as a genre of music, and its roots truly understood. And maybe if you want to have an African music category, which I would find rather strange, because I don't know if there's a European music category. So it comes from all the nuanced, I don't want to say, I'm trying not to use a strong word as I am on TV, but it's sort of this, you know, attempt to keep on putting Africans in one box, like we don't have dynamic experiences or ways we express ourselves. And I think that that's dangerous. And I hope that the Nigerians and Africans that have been recently put into the Grammy committee really start to address this issue and make sure that there's proper categorization. And I was happy when I saw Thames was nominated for an R&B category, because I was like, yes, some of these songs, these are R&B songs.
This is proper.
Exactly. And that, you know, most of our big artists are now signed to major labels, and the major labels look at their artists not just because they originate from Africa and automatically they're Afrobeat artists, but is their music Afrobeat? If it's not, if you're doing a Grammy campaign, make sure they are in the right place.
Well, that's interesting. And I think that this also raises a question of, again, our own structures, like our own award ceremonies. You know, what are we doing? Because now African music is diverse. You know, there's R&B, there's Alte, there's rock, there's, I mean, I listened to one of my favorite albums this year was I Hate It Here by Clay Rocks You. It's a rock album that infuses a lot of elements of Igbo. So she decided that, okay, she does mainstream rock before, but she said, okay, with this project, I'm going to infuse my heritage into rock music, and it came out really beautiful. So now we have all this music, and it now begs the question, so you mean you're going to box all this African music into one best Afrobeat? Or so how about we now, you know, develop our own award categories that help to celebrate our act, you know, including the emerging acts as well, because there are a lot of them doing great work and doing great music, you know. So it's a conversation that we need to have on platforms like this. Well, we'll take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to now zero in on the emerging music industry. Essential Special is still very much live, and you're welcome back to the show. I'm Trust Roy. Now, let's take a recap of some of the major headlines for news and music that happened this year, and then we'll get right in back to the conversation. Now, the very first one, the P-Square Brothers broke up this year, and we miss them very much. Next, Wizkid denounced Afrobeats this year, and it was a major conversation on social media, especially on X. Also, the Grammys nominated Tyler, Thames, Yemi Alade, and others for ahead of the 2025 Grammys. Now, Davido starts record label with United Masters. That happened also earlier this year. Plug Music and PRS collaborated on a songwriting and copyright workshop. Ira Star's Rush broke YouTube record. Ashake also sold out the UK's O2 Arena. And again, we're talking about structures. The Headies announced that, you know, they're going to be returning to Nigeria. Then Thames and Rema made the Barack Obama playlist. Also, Thames released her debut album, Born in the Wild. Yemi Alade, called out media outlets for, blackballing her, sort of. Tyler bagged dual Billboard Afrobeats Awards this year. Then Ira Star joined Coldplay on his Australia tour. Wizkid, his song Piece of My Heart featuring Brent Faiyaz broke Spotify records this year. And also, just recently, Shally Poppy, announced his exit from DAPA. You're welcome to East Central. Now, I still have my guest with me, Isioma Idigbe. Did I get that right?
Idigbe.
Idigbe. That's a Delta name, I believe.
Delta Igbo, yes.
Delta Igbo, okay. Oh, so are you guys the guys that say Anioma? I'm
Yes.
doing some reading now, and I'm hearing that there are
Yes.
people. Okay, interesting. Now let's get back to our conversation on music. We had spoken earlier about structures. Now, what are some of the structures that you believe that we need so that this Afrobeat of ours will not die and run and leave us in the near future?
I mean, fortunately, unfortunately, this has happened before.
Scary.
So I think a lot of people don't know that all the major labels were in Nigeria back in the day, and what we're actually having is a return.
It's a return.
And so we've seen this happen when there's economic instability and the market is not viable for them anymore and they go.
Yeah.
So what we need to do is make sure that doesn't happen again, because literally when they go, it's a desert, and we'll go back to late 80s all the way to the early 2000s and start all over again. So we can't afford that. And some of the ways that we can avoid that is by, one, making sure, it all comes down to domestic monetization. I think everyone needs to keep that in their head, domestic monetization. And how do we ensure domestic monetization? I think the lowest hanging fruit is the collective management system. And ours has been riddled with allegations of impropriety, mishandling of funds. There's a lot of distrust tied up in all sorts of litigation in courts. And so people don't trust the CMO system, and the CMO system hasn't really rewarded Nigerian music business, especially those who have been generating significant revenue in this new renaissance of the Nigerian music industry. So that really has to be fixed. And, one of the things I do, I sit as the secretary of the Record Labels Association, and we're working very closely with the government and the CMO system to try and see how we can create a lasting and sustainable solution to that. So to me, that's the lowest hanging fruit in the room. And already, like the copyright levy order, which we've had since 2012 and has never been implemented, was actually implemented for the first time this year. So we have money that is accumulating that we need to collect. And we need the CMO system to work for us to be able to collect that levy. So that's one, very small piece of domestic monetization. Again, we need the broadcasters to be willing to pay a fair price. This has been an issue for licensing fees.
Music licensing.
I know that there's a challenge now to do that because of the debacle with the CMO system. But for example, at RLP, we've already initiated a direct licensing relationship with the broadcasters, and we had a town hall, I think sometime in October, with the Broadcasters Organization of Nigeria and other broadcasters to say you can license directly from us. We have the rights for our members for you to pay us. So broadcasters need to be willing to pay a fair price for licensing.
But I mean, even beyond being willing to pay, if there is a power to enforce them paying, they should pay.
Yes, and this is where government becomes key, because the government is a key stakeholder to help enforce and ensure that that is done. And that's why organizations like RLP are so important, because they end up doing really this quite boring work, right? Most people in the space just want to create. But you need someone that is there steady working on the policy issues to allow you to make money from what you create. And let's not get carried away with all this foreign money. It could stop. We saw it stop with dancehall, for example. If you remember the good old days of Sean Paul and the rest, it's just not what it used to be.
And Diwali rhythm.
Exactly.
I love that.
So we are potentially at a risk of that, and we need to make sure that we've secured our domestic monetization. And when I say domestic, I don't just think Nigeria. I look at Africa, you know, and so we need to be very, very serious about that. And I think the other issue is having a strong legal system that allows us to easily deal with disputes that arise. So when we were, you know, I was there at the public hearing for the copyright bill, and I remember specifically talking about specialized IP courts. With specialized judges that understand our disputes.
Because I'm not going to start going to explain to you what a split sheet is to a judge that doesn't understand
so, and I think that there needs to be an amendment to the Copyright Act to accommodate that, so we can have access to justice with people that understand not just intellectual property, but the business of music, to make sure that our you know, the rights of people within the business is properly protected. And then on a much more complicated scale, is the issue of how do we get streaming to work. And we now have to deal with the issue of internet penetration. This has to do with the Ministry of Digital Economy, looking at things like ensuring data bundling, so people don't have to be counting their data. They can subscribe and listen. So we have to have strong, if we want streaming to grow, and it's not just a music problem, it's also a film problem, we need to deal with the underlying issue of the cost of data, and people being able to access that all over the country. So to me, those are like the critical issues that we need to deal with to unlock domestic monetization and also free flow. You know, we need to leverage the AFCFTA. I've sat in AFCFTA meetings for IP, which they tend to lump creative economy under. I don't think that's correct. I think creative economy, specifically music, needs to have a protocol on its own. You know, for example, Nigeria stands to benefit so much from visa-free travel for our artists to be able to travel all across Africa and perform. Even within Nigeria, we're not, that's something I forgot to mention, we're not optimized. We do not have purpose-built stadia. The other day, I attended a show, it was a comedy show, at one of the few places we have in Nigeria, but it's very small for events. And what struck me was this show was packed, and it was fairly easy to coordinate because it was purpose-built. And I was like, wow, if we had one in every local government of this, a small artist that has a followership can easily monetize and tour within the country. We need to be able to tour the 36 states of Nigeria and the major cities.
It's crazy. Earlier this year, I was planning a tour for an emerging artist that I work with, and the cost of touring in Nigeria is bonkers.
Yeah, it is. And of course, we can't, there are the wider issues that affect every industry, like security. If I'm touring, I'm not likely jumping on planes. I'm likely being in a bus, in a car. I need to be safe, or on a train. So those wider infrastructure gaps we have in Nigeria, and our specific ones, which is this, you know, purpose-built venues, affect our ability to monetize. And that's why you look like, there's one artist, I think it's called G Herbo or something. I don't even know what songs this guy does. He's just a rapper. But he seems to make a lot of money just domestically in America. So, and Nigeria has a population big enough to be able to sustain that. And then when you now look at the entire continent, and we leverage the AFCFTA protocol to be able to move, for example, skilled hands in terms of show production between countries, which will also help you upskill domestically, being able to move between countries to tour, then, you know, the opportunities are really unlimited. So for me, those are like the critical issues we need to do. But again, like I said in the beginning, the focus must be domestic monetization. Everyone from the music executives to the musicians themselves need to be concerned about domestic monetization.
It sounds like a lot to achieve, but at the same time, it sounds like it's fairly easy conversation to be had, right? But a lot of times, I just keep wondering, like, why are these things not, you know, why is it so difficult for these conversations to even start? I mean, you mentioned the copyright levy that was in place since God knows how long ago, and it just got implemented, you know, this year. You know, so we have a lot of these problems that are, you know, kind of affecting the work that needs to be done with our music. But something that you said earlier struck me, and I've recently been doing some research into like our CMOs and collection agencies. Now, I took my time to attend the AGN meeting for COSON.
Oh, interesting.
This year. I wanted to find out like what are these people about? Because I'm of the opinion that if we don't engage with these CMOs, we don't even know what is happening there. So there is no way to even, you don't know what is going on. So you cannot say, oh, these people are not working because you don't know how they move. So I took my time, went to research. I even tried to attend the AGN meeting for MCSN. But what struck me about their own system is that, first of all, the press wasn't allowed in. And then they have a limitation, a cap, that only people that are members from 2023 can attend an AGN meeting for an association that I am now a member of.
This is what MCSN?
Yes, this is for MCSN. I don't know. So these are the things that, for me, like when you talk about distrust, right? I took my time to ask the one of the heads of COSON. I think his name is Tony, the DG of Okoroji. I asked him a question about the distrust in the system. My question was framed somehow like this. I was like, you're here now telling us that you don't have any problems at your CMO, but what on the street is that artists don't trust you. So what are you doing to rebuild that trust? What are you doing to educate people about? Because you're telling us that you have well over 5,000 artists, but I'm looking out here, and I am not seeing the Afrobeats artists that are on Apple Music Top 10. The people I'm seeing here, for lack of better words, are Baba Balawa. And here is his response to me. Watch this.
We circulate this every year. We audit our accounts every year without question. And we circulate it to our members, and we take questions on it, and members resolve. We circulate this every year. We audit our accounts every year without question. And we circulate it to our members, and we take questions on it, and members resolve that they are satisfied. That's our duty. We cannot go to every kitchen and every parlor to show everybody what this thing. Almost 5,500 members. They can't all be here. The people who have sent proxies to this meeting, they are deemed to be here. The gentleman here tells me that we have hundreds of people online. As a journalist, you know that in this day and age, you don't have to be physically present anywhere to be engaged in a meeting. People think that because there is trouble in Piman, there's trouble here, there's trouble everywhere. Is there trouble at Koson? No. We have none.
Sima, this was the response I got for asking that question.
Well, I didn't expect a different response from Tony Okoroji, to be honest with you. And so one of the things, in fact, when I get into these situations, I laugh, say, well, I've really done a lot in this music industry. So in 2019 or 2020, I was commissioned to do a study on collective management of copyright. And it was commissioned by the French Development Agency. And so we studied all the CMOs, not just the music ones. And this was what we found. Actually, COSON at the time, because they no longer have a license to act as a collective management organization for music. The only licensed one is MCSN at the moment. And what we found was COSON was the most efficient CMO of all the CMOs in the country. And however, they were still riddled with these issues of distrust and the rest. And they had big lawsuits. If you remember, F.L. Morobe and Obiasika and, Audu and the rest. And I think some of those suits are still ongoing. And what was the, when you go down into it, the issue is this man. I genuinely believe that when he started COSON, he had good intentions. But somewhere along the line, he's become an inhibitor to the organization thriving. And it's not a COSON problem. It's a Nigerian problem. People start things and then those things become the only thing they have. They don't build them to be sustainable beyond them. I think that these CMOs should be embarrassed about having rules like if you were not a member from 2003, you can't join a meeting. 2023, you can't join a meeting. That doesn't make any iota of sense. If you remember at the SASEM MBA Africa thing, I talked about young people coming into these spaces because that's how they're going to be sustainable. You're not going to be alive forever. How can you build a structure that is a one-man army?
Isioma, thank you so much. We don't have a lot of time to zero in on this conversation, and I'm going to speak with my producer so that we can repeat this conversation because I believe that education is a key part of letting people understand what is happening in the ecosystem. Because, somebody might just be working and he has the opportunity to talk to the person and say, oh, music has an issue. We need to address it because it's adding value to our creative economy. And they can do that. Thank you so much. Essential Special has just been really amazing. Unfortunately, all our other guests were able to make it because the traffic for Dirty December is on another level. But hopefully, we'll have them in the studio some other time. Join us. My name is Trust Troy. Thank you for watching.